Listen to The Astonishing Junk Drawer exclusively at patreon.com/astonishinglegends.
I was at the Stanley Hotel.
Wow, Kristen's not a bad artist. I didn't know she could draw.
Fellow human beings on a wonderful planet we call Earth.
Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp present this as this is genuine military released footage.
He claimed that he saw a UFO approaching the space station.
I watched the sequel recently, and that was a mistake.
22?
This is Quark, a Buck Henry show about garbage men in space.
I wouldn't worry about that. You're on so many lists now, and it's too many for them to track.
If you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or are concerned that someone you know may be in danger of hurting himself or herself, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is staffed by certified crisis response professionals. Astonishing Legends would like to thank Mint Mobile, Wild Grain, Squarespace, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
Some stories are so bizarre that the details seem unbelievable when you first discover them. Your mind runs through the range of possibilities that generally start with, "This is made up," or "a hoax." But shortly after that, two words creep from the dark background of your consciousness into the warm light at the forefront of your mind. What if? What if some or any part of this really happened? Tonight, in this part one of a two-part series on this astonishing legend, we'll explore a mysterious phenomenon that took place in the small village of Sarichina, Bulgaria, in 1990. It all started with a dream a local man had. In this dream, he was contacted by famous historical figures from Bulgaria's past who told him that not only was he descended from a long-ago Tsar named Samuel, but that a great treasure of Samuel's could be found right in his native village of Sarichina. You would think that sort of lead might not go far, but on December 6, 1990, the Bulgarian military arrived to search for this treasure, whatever it may be. The Tsarichina villagers had no idea what was happening, only that the military showed up, put up a fence, brought in guards with Kalashnikovs, and began digging, chasing away any prying eyes. During the work being done, stories began to leak out of a strange cave spiraling downward. Was the treasure really a literal treasure, or was it something far more important to humanity? The digging continued night and day for over 2 years. During that time, one of 3 psychics involved resigned from the project and shortly thereafter committed suicide by jumping off a 10-story building. Her father, also involved, was found dead beneath a bridge in the city of Sofia 4 years later under mysterious circumstances. Another psychic working as a point person on the case received instructions telepathically that told her, "Only officers can dig." According to local legend, the soldiers involved in the work began to experience highly unusual things in and around the area of excavation, including lights that passed through them as they attempted to retreat to the surface. There are rumors that a firefight broke out in the depths, leaving 2 men dead. As if the story couldn't be any stranger, one of the psychics consulted was the world-famous blind clairvoyant Baba Vanga. At one point, she warned them to stop digging. That was no treasure they were about to disturb, but something that wanted to be left alone. 16 million Levs, Bulgarian currency, were spent on the excavation, only for it to be abruptly halted after 2 years and the entrance to the hole filled with concrete. Theories about what happened in Zarichina run the gamut from alien artifacts to secret government experiments and even supernatural forces. Why is it still classified by the Bulgarian government?
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is listener Nikolai and Forrest Burgess.
If you want to live, no pictures.
A young Bulgarian officer guarding the site to journalist Dimitar Kekemenov, who first broke the story of the dig.
Join us tonight for part 1 of our 2-part series, Entombed in Zarichina.
we're back.
That we are.
Is there anything else?
No, there's no news right now. I'm really falling down on the job with the merch.
Well,
I need to fix that. I just want people to know I'm actually going to bring somebody in to deal with that who was amazing, and she wanted to do it, but her day job was too much, and so now the it's languishing a bit. But we have big plans for some new stuff in there, so I just need to make some phone calls, that's all.
Well, okay, don't beat yourself up. People will wait.
Oh, wait, there is one other important announcement. Forrest and I will both be attending Monster Fest on June 3rd, 2023 at the Doubletree by Hilton in downtown Canton, Ohio. This will be a full-day event with vendors, artists, and guest speakers. We'll actually be there doing a live podcast recording, too. And I think the Doubletree may have already filled up, so they wanted us to share that there's an overflow hotel, the Embassy Suites by Hilton at the Akron Canton Airport. This is in Ohio, folks. Their phone number is 330-305-0500, 330-305-0500. If you call them, maybe ask if they have a block of rooms or some rooms for Monster Fest. But either way, tickets are available now at the Small Town Monsters website and Facebook event page. There will also be tickets at the door. It's family friendly, and children under 12 will be admitted for free. They are also premiering a new Small Town Monsters film the night before at the Canton Palace Theater, and yes, we will be there too. Tickets will be available for that through the theater's website. So check that out, folks. We'll have links in the show notes.
Yes, and we're really looking forward to this one, as not only are we going to be there, but so are our dear friends Richard Haddam and Jim Harold. It should be a blast.
Yes.
And I guess that's it then. So to the delight of many of our listeners, let's get right to the story.
Let's do it. Man, this story is crazy. Let's start with how this story came to us. Credit to our friend Nikolai, who's a listener. He emailed us the story way back in January of 2022.
That's not that way back for us, really.
I know. It's for us. That's like, it's a couple episodes ago.
I thought it was going to be at least 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, there's some people that we're still going to write back a year from now that wrote in 4 years ago. But I did. I took it and I threw it in our story folder. For whatever reason, when we were looking for something to do next, I always like to think someday we'll have it all planned out for the whole rest of the year. But a lot of times, even if we have something in mind, it's like, we got to change it up. Let's do something. Let's dig through the folders and see what we can find.
It's like a DJ set. You don't stick to it. I mean, you just got to read the crowd. You got to feel the vibe. And sometimes, actually, we're having one coming up that I'm pretty excited about. And it just happened because it was offered to us as an opportunity to talk to somebody very special. It's like, well, yeah, we got to do that. And you don't say like, hey, come back in a year.
Right.
No, you got to grab it when it's hot. And in this case, we try to, this is all artisanally crafted. It's curated. It's DJ'd. And in this case,
we can't use curated anymore. I think curated has been canceled for overuse.
Well, let's hope not, because I think that's what we're doing here. But the idea is that we try to space it out because we know that we offer and delve into a broad range of different topics. And, people have different tastes. Yeah. When you mention this, like, this is hitting all the cylinders here. There's some mystery. There's some truth. There's a lot of weird and wackiness going on.
And that's why it jumped out at me. And before we go any further, I want to play this message that Nikolai sent in to us about when he first emailed this.
Hi guys, Nikolai here. Thank you very much for covering the topic. Since the first time I listened to your show, I hope that I can get in touch with you and propose a topic. So this is like a dream come true. I want to say thank you very much for your time and wish you all the best. Greetings from Bulgaria and stay awesome.
This is so intriguing. Now, on paper, you think, great, another Mel's hole. That's not what this is at all. That's not what this is at all.
Wait, how many holes have we done? There's Huska Castle.
Huska Castle, Huska,
House of Huska.
The Hell Hole. Yeah, that was a long time ago, though.
We've also done Kincaid's Cave.
Yeah, that's not really a hole.
Well, no, this one there's some parallels here.
That's true.
I think you've forgotten, my friend, because I know people think, well, that's a Joseph Mulhattan tall tale that he just made some newspaper money on selling that story. But there's a lot more to it. And I'm not going to suggest people go back and listen to it because that was our early days. But there's more to it than just a hole in the ground. And when you go to look at it, it's the same things that are found. I'll wait for that because, like I said, I'm just now realizing that there are some parallels if you take that story to be something there with it. Because what's at the end of the discovery is that it's mind-blowing, and it leads to question our reality and existence and the history of humankind. There's something about the depths of the earth, the depths of the sea, the depths of Lake Baikal, nether regions and marginal places, there's weird stuff under there.
I just want to add, though, that the thing's different about this, because you do talk about Kincaid's Cave. Well, that's in the side of a cliff. Mel's Hole is bottomless. This one's not. This is not about a bottomless pit.
Well,
however,
we don't know.
I know a little bit because we've done some research, but this one does have lots of ingredients of what makes a great astonishing legend. Let me list.
Wait a second. Are you talking about corkboard, Post-its in red yard, and then old newspaper clippings? And
yeah. That's where we got to go. This is we're going into it right. Listen to all this stuff that plays into this.
Okay,
this is it. So first of all, it's a mystery. That's an easy one. There's also military secrecy.
Yep.
It's secret to this day, still classified now. There's weird rumors. There's a wild story about it. It takes place in the middle of nowhere. There was a huge amount of money spent on it, millions.
That also is connecting to, what else do we call it? The money pit. Oak
Right.
Island.
That's right.
And that
there
there's
are
also
parallels.
Yes, there are. This might be more about the philosophical, thematic implications that it's like when you look at Oak Island, the way this thing's arranged is that there's some spirituality to it in the way it was designed and the archetypical meaning of it, because then it gets into Enoch's hole of knowledge and the different layers and what the chambers mean and the symbolism that goes with it. So anyway, yeah, it's got all that, but it did cost a lot of money back then. Like just
16 million levs, which I think today that would be about $9 million US. I'm not sure what the value of the dollar or the lev was in 1990 when this took place, but this is a lot of money going in a hole. We also have psychics, including Baba Vanga, which you might be like, I don't recognize that. I don't know what that is. But if you're of a certain age, you see her face, you're going to recognize her. She was an iconic presence in the world of sort of strange clairvoyance that were making the scene back during this time period and in the decades leading up to it. She's called the Nostradamus of the Balkans, actually.
Yeah,
she was a big deal. It's thought to have an 80% success rate in her predictions, although I couldn't find any statistical hard evidence of that. There are a lot of folks in that part of the world that believed very much in her her ability to see the future.
That's all murky, as if you want to try and nail it all down into statistics. And what we've researched before and have talked with psychics about is that generally it's considered anything above 80%, your best psychics are about in that range. Nobody's 100%, which I know we all want to prove that it's a repeatable phenomenon that happens, but you're just not going to get that, because that would be frightening. If everything I say actually comes true, imagine that person to be hounded, because everybody, we'd be breaking down that door trying to figure out, like, well, what's going to happen to me? That's what everybody wants to know. What's going to happen to the world? So I think by, let's say, cosmic grand design, that you're not going to get anything past 80%. So that's pretty good. But I was going to say the other Baba that a lot of our audience is familiar with is Baba Yaga. That whole legend there, which is a lot of fun, a whole lot of scary, but Baba means grandmother.
And Baba Yaga, I think she rides around in a flying pestle, like a mortar. She has a mortar and pestle, I think. So.
Well, Baba, there's the cabin that is propped up and ambulatory on one giant like chicken leg.
Yeah.
And then apparently you go inside, and it is that what I love too, the visual imagery of it. It's huge on the inside, small on the outside, like a lot of UFOs and things you'll find on Doctor Who. And I think what happens with a lot of psychic predictions, especially famous ones, is that 4 or 5 statements will be made about a specific subject, and people will say, well, 2 of those or 3 of those came true, but the other 4 or 5, that didn't, so we're not counting that. And there's your 20% out of the 80% that is not true. But it's hard to say what really is happening, because it's inscrutable. You can't investigate it, because it's predictions or descriptions about things that we have no way of verifying. But in this case, we do know that this is a real place. These are real people.
Well, that's not all. This also has clandestine removal of something at night. There's history of that. Was it just dirt being removed? We don't know. There's UFO sightings, which the villagers themselves saw.
Yeah.
There are threats to journalists. There are witness accounts that seem to disappear, the witnesses themselves kind of vanishing. There might be aliens. There's telepathic messages. There's cryptic writing in an unknown language. Force fields, what I like to call matrix problems.
Fiddling with reality.
Yeah, meddling with reality. And then disappearing records of events, including notebooks and photographs, all gone. Just vanished. Or as one article I read said, cold. There's a lot going into this. It's time to get into the main story. We do want to touch on what our sources are. Most of this comes from scouring the internet, not just the United States, but also in Bulgaria. And we consulted with Nikolai on some pronunciations. So save the emails. We're going to do the best we can here.
Well, we're going to try our best.
Another thing we want to point out is that these Bulgarian sources can lead to some translation issues. There were a few things that I had to read anyway that I had to get like 10, 15 pages into something, and then on the 15th page, I suddenly understood what they were trying to say on the second page. And because the translation had so wonky. So
that's true. And what you'll find is that at least a lot of Western European and American sources who've repackaged the story, I think are going off of just computer translation and just regurgitating it. So you have to sift through a lot of it to find the wheat and the chaff, and what's chaff and what's, like I said, perhaps a bad logic translation. Like as Scott said, you got to read through a lot of it and then go back and kind of piece together what's actually happening here and what's the chronology of all this. That was the other thing, talk about cold. This starts off in December when there's snow and a lot of cold, and you're going to go digging now, but you can't wait for the spring and then into the summer. So hats off to these folks. They're very hardy and decided that this thing is important enough to start right away. So this thing just takes off like a rocket. And here's the other thing, as you'll hear, once you hear about the proposal of this, you'll get excited, much as the same people, anybody who's heard of the Oak Island, when you start discovering things. Yeah, I want to know more about this. Keep digging.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why we're covering it on our show, because that's the kind of stuff we love to talk about. Well, we will be listing, as we always do, all of our sources in the show notes and on the webpage for this episode, but we'll try to loosely point out where they come from as we go along. So, folks, when you hear this story, you might think this is all made up. You listen to us cover the infamous coast-to-coast story of Mel's Hole, or maybe you did. If you're new to the show, you can go back and listen to that one. It's a little bit sillier, but it's still pretty intriguing. That was just one guy calling in and telling an unverifiable story. Is this another one like that? No. This is entirely different. And when I say no, envision like that Bugs Bunny meme where he goes, no, and his lips come out. I love that.
Yes.
This is entirely different. There is hard proof that something happened here. And that hard proof is thanks to an intrepid Bulgarian journalist named Dimitar Kekemenov and his photographers, Alexander Manzov and Gorgi Tsvetkov-Gushori. At the time, they were working for a paper in Bulgaria called Night Work.
Great title.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea, actually. As near as we can tell via translation, I think it was actually published at night.
Yeah.
Which is a great idea, because at one point he's talking in a story about how this all went down, and editions essentially going out at midnight, unless, again, I'm misunderstanding the translation. But it seemed like a really cool idea.
No, it's totally a Coal Shack, the Night Stalker.
Yeah.
It's a reporting of strange things that, that get stranger and stranger. It's not the Inquirer or Weekly World News, Bat Boy, all that kind of stuff. It's a serious paper.
That's right. And the point is, without Statkov's reporting, there might be no record of what took place at Sarichina from late 1990 to 92. With it, we have detailed observations and photographs. This happened, or some form of it did.
Right.
Listen to how Dimitar Kekemenov stumbled across the story that went globally viral when the internet was still in its infancy. This excerpt is from a November 2018 article in the Bulgarian paper Blitz entitled The Story of the Mystical Zarichina Hole, told by an eyewitness.
One evening, as a story editor, I had to figure out what the front of the issue would be. I was a forensics reporter at the time and wondered what I could find that would be worthy of a top story. I knew almost all the heads of the departments of the National Investigation Service, but I came across the investigator, Colonel Hristo Mishev. I still call him by Misho, a very open, communicative, and interesting person. He was responsible for major construction accidents, catastrophes, and other miracles. He was going to the Parliament in a company car, and he offered to drop me somewhere on the way to talk. As I got into the car and shouted to him, "Give me something, some news," he shouts, "I have nothing to tell you. If you want something, there's a mystery for me too." I have a villa in the village of Sarichina, Kostinbrodsko. There, the military has been digging around the clock for almost 2 years. They have fenced off everything from sight with a fence. There are some tents inside they guard with automatics. A chicken couldn't get in there. There's some secret object in there. I don't know what they're doing, but one day, while I was waiting on the road for a handyman to bring me lumber for the cottage with a tractor, I went over to check it out, and a young officer yells at me, "Leave! You can't stay here!" I tell him I'm a colonel from the General Investigation Department, and he yells at me, "I don't care. Leave. It's an order. I have the authority to detain you if you don't obey." I just freaked out. How could some lieutenant command me, a colonel, from the main office? However, I obeyed and left, and inside the fence, you could hear the rumbling of machines. The military was doing something there, but there was no one to tell you what, and the people of the village are whispering. Does that intrigue you? Go and dig! I didn't have time to react, but as soon as my editorial duty was done, I left in a car, together with a photographer, Alexander Manzov, to Tsarichina.
So, in looking at all of the research and poring over things and figuring out who came to what information first, it does seem a lot like Dimitar Kekemenov is the guy who broke this story. It did go global. Lots of other journalists showed up.
Right.
There's a point at which they actually were allowed to tour the site.
Right.
But I also wanted to make it clear in reading Stotkoff's story in one of the articles that we found at Blitz, he seemed to be a little bit slighted by the fact that a lot of people went and ran with this, and they didn't give a nod to him for being the one that uncovered it.
Well,
you know,
of course, that usually happens. But in one of the more reliable web sources that was given to us by Nikolai is the story in 4 parts, which essentially are excerpts coming from the book that we're going to discuss is the main account here, along with some reporting. But as you said earlier, a lot of the official reporting, well, this is top secret, so you're not going to get it. But at the time, let's say a more controlled environment and country that was formerly behind the Iron Curtain. So you're not going to get a lot of stuff that's just offered up, and it's going to be a lot of what's been leaking out from people who were actually there. But it's explained that this was a little bit of a media frenzy at the time. As it says here in that translated article, to remember this is all originally in Bulgarian, so it's just Google trying to translate it. The digging in question reached all the way to the plenary hall of the National Assembly. And that means the fully attended and authoritative National Assembly of the country. And so it was known to the national government here. It goes on to say, at a later stage, almost all dailies joined. That means almost all daily news outlets joined in reporting of this. A team of Bulgarian National Television, Afir 2, that might be the channel designation here, entered the mysterious tunnel. So TV journalists were in there. As the article goes on to say, a journalistic raid was carried out at the place of the event on the order of the then Deputy Minister of Defense, Nikola Daskalov. So they ordered it to be covered. And that's what I thought, what would you need to, I guess, I don't know if it's a defense or whatever, but it's dragging, as the people say, something out into the sunlight as a disinfectant, not as a secret, but you make people know about it. And that's what's going to also kind of protect it. But at the same time, you could be talking about state secrets here.
Right.
That you don't want out. And so this is an odd thing. I think it's more of a phenomenon, or thought to be at this point. But also, you can't just have looky-loos and treasure hunters going in there at night, digging on their own and messing the place up. But there's another reporter who I think we found maybe on LinkedIn. Scott and I are going to look at that a little closer. But the site was visited, it says here, by Mrs. Vasila Georgieva, correspondent for France Press in Sofia. Even 2 French journalists were there. So it's a little bit of the international or Western European press coming to take a look at it. So it's not like there's one report, and it was Joseph Mulhadden.
Sotkoff specifically mentions French reporters showing up and basically interviewing him and then taking the story and publishing it and not saying anything about him, and also not talking to anyone else.
Hey, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
But it wasn't her, so that's
Right.
I just wanted to make sure,
Right.
because if he listens to it, I wanted to make sure that was
No. Yeah, absolutely. And it is hard to find out. Like I said, this whole thing's very foreign to us on so many levels. But again, it's documented, and it wasn't that long ago, I was going to say. You're talking about 1990,
Right.
and some of these articles are coming out 2018, 2020. So
Yeah, let's say it's 33 years ago, and I happen to know that because this happened right after my 1990 300ZX was built. That I still have.
it's the gauge of everything in your life.
Yeah, well,
by
I drove it
the car-
today.
yeah.
Come on. It's 33 years
Oh,
old
okay.
now. I can
Well,
hardly
good for
believe it.
you.
Well, man, how's your tax prep going this year?
Just finished it this weekend, and man, I'll tell you, I was going over the last couple of years of expenses compared to this year, and it's a bit troubling, to say the least, how costs are dramatically increasing.
Oh, yeah, groceries, utilities, gas, streaming services, pretty much everything is going way up. Inflation is hitting everyone, everywhere. Yeah. But there's one way you can hit back and save a ton with an essential, and that's by switching to Mint Mobile.
Heck yeah, and that's one area where I saved a huge amount of cash, especially over the last few years since I switched to Mint Mobile. All these other services, it seems the prices have gone way up, but you're still getting the same thing or even less.
I know, and Mint Mobile still offers phone plans for just $15 a month. Because Mint Mobile was the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, you can order from home and save a ton. And they can keep costs low because they don't have to pay for all those expensive traditional retail costs, like maintaining physical stores.
Yeah.
And you still get premium service that's as good or better than any other provider out there.
True dat. I haven't noticed any difference other than I've saved thousands by now, and I get as much data as I want. So if you're also one of those folks looking to recoup some extra savings this year, you need to switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. And switching over is a breeze. It just takes minutes.
It really does. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/AL.
That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AL. Hey, how was your trip down to the beach for your son's spring break?
Oh, man, I tell you what, it was fantastic. Sound of the waves at night, fresh salt air, no distractions, and good food.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned your low country boil. I would love to try that sometime.
Well, man, come on down whenever you want, and we'll get the pot going.
Sold, my friend. And I hope you had some hot, fresh, crusty bread to go with it.
Well, you know what? I actually forgot to put it on the grocery list, and the bigger stores are about 40 minutes away. But then I remembered this is where wild grain would have really come in handy. Yeah. I could have just shipped it to wherever we were going, and then once it's in the freezer, bread, rolls, pastries, pastas, and more are only 25 minutes or less in the oven before they're on your table. And let me tell you, once family and friends find out you're relaxing at the beach, suddenly they have all the time in the world to come visit, and you don't want to be caught short-handed on food.
No, you don't. Well, Just Baked Bread is a winner every time. Perfect for springtime meals, and with wild grain, there's really no point in making the dough yourself.
Yeah, I would not even attempt that. If you haven't heard, Wild Grain is the first ever bake-from-frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries. And you'll never get bored with Wild Grain because they're constantly adding new, seasonal, and limited-time special items to try.
And not only do you feel good about serving wholesome, nourishing food, but you can also feel good about subscribing. Because for every new member, Wild Grain donates 6 meals to the Greater Boston Food Bank, so you can eat good and do good at the same time.
All you have to do is sign up at wildgrain.com/legends and choose which type of box you want to receive and how often. It's easy to reschedule, skip, or cancel.
Plus, for a limited time, you can get $30 off the first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/legends to start your subscription. You heard me, free croissants in every box, and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/legends.
Those croissants are awesome, by the way.
They are.
That's wildgrain.com/legends, or you can use promo code LEGENDS at checkout.
Hello everyone, I'm Ray, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Sarichina and the town before we get into the story itself here.
One thing I wanted us to mention is that it's kind of an out-of-the-way place.
It's super out of the way. Yeah.
It is super out of the way, even though it's in central Bulgaria.
Yeah, if you look on the map at Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever, and you look at it, you almost think, I even measured just to make sure, it almost looks like it's the dead center, but it's not quite. If you go due west, it's like 265 miles to the coast, and if you go due east, it's like 235. But that's pretty close to the middle of the country on a latitude there.
Exactly, and you are going to talk about how the initial team found the place, because that's pretty remarkable in and of itself.
We will get into that. So this little village is about 1,000 meters or 3,300 feet above sea level. It has 4 little sections. In 1990, they think there were maybe 80 to 100 residents living there. So that's a small town.
Yeah, it's a hamlet.
Yeah, it's a hamlet.
There's actual population designations, but what we learned before getting into trouble talking about that in the UK is that it depends on the country. They have slightly different definitions based on population, but this is a small little, as described earlier, villa, hamlet, village. Everybody knows each other, and so any kind of news like this, everybody's talking about it immediately.
It unfortunately doesn't have the most well-developed economy. There's animal husbandry. No. However, at the time, I don't know if this is still true, it had been suffering from a drought.
Yeah.
The roads are not very many of them are actually paved.
Or have signs.
Yeah, or have signs. Snow closes the area down. According to Colonel Kanev, whose book we'll be sharing some information from, bread basically came to the town twice a week on Monday and Friday. And while the military was there, they sometimes helped to make sure that got distributed.
Yeah.
The weekends were more lively because villagers would all assemble. They would come down to the pub there, which is very close to where the hole used to be. And it is essentially called Restaurant The Hole. Not Sarichina, just the hole. It's right there by the hole. We'll be showing our patrons where that restaurant is. It's apparently temporarily closed, according to Google Earth right now.
Yeah.
But it's a village that wasn't known to most Bulgarians before this happened. After it became much more renowned, and people are still visiting it to this day. If you go online and look, there's thousands of pictures from people who've made pilgrimages there to see where the hole was, which is how these things always go.
Well, I get it's a little like Rick Steves saying, like, hey, if you want to take time to go see the Leaning Tower of Pisa, it's going to put a dent in your travel logistics just to go see that one thing and act like you're holding your hand up and take the photo. There's not a whole lot of other stuff around there to do. So I also heard that about the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
Spectacular, beautiful, stunning, just not a lot else around there for the average tourist. So just know that if you're going to go check out the hole. Plus, it's been cemented over.
Yeah, and now that's overgrown with grass.
Right.
And it's behind a fence. But I get ahead of myself. So the sources for this next section that are going to lay out the story of how this all started come from the Google English translation of Colonel Tsvetko Kanev's book, The Phenomenon of Zarichina. A little bit of a disclaimer. Too much happened here in 2 years to boil it all down here, but there are some watershed moments that we wanted to share, like the outset of the operation and other larger findings of the work. So we're going to do that now. Beyond that, the series of events that take place have a lot of similarities to a few other topics we covered, and we'll be mentioning that here as we go on. Let's get to the beginning of how this all came about, though. It all starts with a dream that a local villager had. He was a man named Dimitar Kekemenov, and this is different from Dimitar Statkov, the journalist.
Right.
Kekemenov approached the director general of an organization in Bulgaria known as the Phenomena Association. It had only been formed on November 21st of 1990, so it was scarcely a few days old when this happened.
Yeah.
The director general at that time was a man named Stamen Stomenov. Kekemenov said that it was family lore within his family that there was a great treasure of the Tsar Samuel in Zarichina. He then embarrassingly relayed that he had had a shocking dream about it. In this dream, he was approached by famous Bulgarian historical figures. Ivan Vazov, the most prominent writer, poet, playwright, and novelist in Bulgarian history. Vasilevsky, a Bulgarian revolutionary known as the Apostle of Freedom. He founded a movement to liberate Bulgaria from Ottoman rule. Gorgi Sava Rakovsky, another Bulgarian revolutionary and Freemason, again focused on freeing Bulgaria from Ottoman rule, and also Hristo Botev, a revolutionary and a poet, another national hero and close friend of Vasilevsky, with whom he lived with during a period of exile. So these four men, these superstars of Bulgarian history, came to Kekemenov in his dream, and Georgy Rakovsky, in the dream, put his hand on the shoulder of Kekemenov and said, "The blood of Tsar Samuel is in your veins, and as his descendant, you should lead the Bulgarian people to Samuel's treasure." So
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. So I want to talk a little bit about Tsar Samuel. He was a czar in the First Bulgarian Empire from the year 997 to the year 1014. And from 977 to 997, he was a general under Roman I of Bulgaria, the second surviving son of Emperor Peter I of Bulgaria, and co-ruled with him. Samuel struggled to preserve the country's independence from the Byzantine Empire. His rule was characterized by constant warfare against the Byzantines and their equally ambitious ruler, Basil II. So we'll cover a little bit more about this. There's actually a really interesting facial reconstruction of him on the Wikipedia page that's based on his remains. It's not just an artist's depiction. You can actually look and see what this guy looks like, which is pretty impressive for someone that passed away in the year 1014.
Yeah, it's been a while, been some time.
It was a while back. Yeah.
But he's a great leader of Bulgarian history in the fact that he led pretty much very successful military campaigns, kept the country together, and as you know, the mark of a good ruler, as soon as he's gone, died of a heart attack, I believe, the country falls apart. And so they needed his leadership for that time. And I just want to make a point here is that you may see some translations saying he was King Samuel, but really he's Tsar, meaning more like emperor of his ancestors and father. The way it's explained to me, or the way that I understand it, is that king, you can be king of a little duchy, this a little bit of an area, and I like this explanation here, like a regional manager, let's say, of a company.
Right.
And you control that area, that region, but there's a CEO of the company, and that's the emperor, and they have final say over, it could be many kingdoms. The point being, with mentioning all that history as it pertains to this whole, is that if anybody's going to have a fortune, he's very likely to have one. And what do you do? You don't put it in the national coffers because those get raided, which is maybe why this whole procedure costs 16 million levs. We'll see about that. But in this case, there could very well be a historical treasure, like so many of them throughout history, squirreled away in a secreted location that only a few know about. And at this point, it's been lost. And you know what? That's the other thing I will say is that as we looked in, was it Coronado's Children and a lot of treasure books that you and I have come across, Lafitte, so many of these stories and legends about lost treasure involve a paranormal or supernatural aspect where it's been lost, but the location has been told to someone living currently, like, you got to find this. And it was the same thing with Lafitte's treasure.
Well, it's like the remote viewers say, what is it? The more something is a secret, the more it stands out in psychic space.
Yeah,
right?
That was Pat Price, former renowned, really gifted psychic and former commissioner, I think, of the Burbank Police, somewhere down here in Southern California, one of these small towns here. But he said, how is this possible when something is supposed to be very top secret? He says, the more you try to hide something, the more it shines in psychic space.
I love that quote. I love that. And that guy was, without a doubt, had a gift. No matter what you think about anything, it was uncanny what he was capable of. God rest his soul.
That was scientifically charted, at least tracked. And again, no one's 100%, but I would guess when you meet somebody personally that's 80% and they start telling you things about your own life that come true, it makes an impression. So in this case, though, what you have here is a possibly buried historical treasure. So that alone is worth looking up. And as we mentioned, Bulgaria, well, yes, there was a lot of corruption going on at the time, but they're struggling with their finances. This would be a huge boon to the place, not only for the government, but as the colonel here who wrote this book, as he said, this should be a government military operation because it cannot be trusted to the selflessness of any individuals, because
we're in a national pride zone here.
National pride, and you know, as we always know, it's It's treasure of the Sierra Madre. People get inflamed. They all want the prize for themselves, and it just turns into a lot of murder.
Well, and there's another really critical fact, which I had in our outline a little bit later down here, but might as well point it out now. This is just a few months after the fall of the Berlin Wall.
That's right.
Communism is collapsing, and a lot of the folks involved in what's happening here are former members of the communist regime, and they're trying to figure out what their place is in the upcoming future for Bulgaria.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there. And here's the other thing, though, that I want to say, talking about squirreling away Samuel's treasure somewhere in a remote location. There's one problem with that, is the fact is that the town is called Zarichina. It's got Tsar right in the name. And I think the colonel had said in his book, he was like, I couldn't really figure out what this meant. He said the closest he came back to was Sarajevo, kind of like Sarajevo, but Sarajevo.
Yeah.
And it had something to do with hills and that sort of thing. But I don't think he could make a clear connection to it historically, at least back in the 1990s, as to what it meant.
But it also could pertain to the Tsar, Samuel, but also his father, the Tsar. So it's Big Tsar, Little Tsar is kind of a rough interpretation.
Too,
right. And so the father had liked to visit this place, and then the son, Samuel, has visited the place. So it's like, father king, son king.
Oh, so maybe it's a little retreat. Also, still, good place to bury. I mean, if you're going to go looking for something, go to the vacation cottage, which is also apparently that other guy. He was like, I have a villa there. Yeah. I don't know. They've been digging for 2 years. You want a story? Go check that out.
Or I guess, this is the other thing that's more fanciful fiction, or maybe not, is that like a national treasure, you hide it in a very obvious place just below, the major cathedral or something, because then people don't think to ask and the place is not very accessible. But in this case, it's like, look, this is a pretty out of the way little hamlet, and you could be doing something in, well, I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like, even more rural and more separated back in Samuel's day. And you're talking about the 900s to 1000s. So yeah, back then you could get away with doing something on an administrative state level, let's say, and not many people knowing about it.
Right.
But it's like with any other treasure. What good is it if nobody remembers it's buried or where it's at?
Well, circling back to Kekemenov in his dream, he maintained that, because he lived in the village, he was from the village.
Right.
Every time he walked past the site where the digging was occurring, he would hear a voice in his head that would say to him in a very loud way, look, there's something very important here, right here. So after he shares his dream with the leader of the newly formed paranormal group, they get together to set up a meeting between Kekemenov and a psychic and bioenergy therapist named Dimitar Kekemenov, a major from the Bulgarian Military Science Department, and a psychic who was also a radio operator in the National Intelligence Service named Dora Petrova.
Okay, just a quick aside here. I want to remind folks is that once we start mentioning psychics and bioenergy therapists and people who are energy workers, I know a lot of people's eyes start to roll backwards. But as we've said many times before, Eastern Bloc countries like the Soviets take this stuff seriously. And you could say like, well, come on, how could they? This is all crazy baloney. Well, you judge them by their actions and what they've done. And here, they don't think it's a lot of baloney. They think there's something to it.
There's also some portions of this story and these categories in the semantics that are lost in translation.
Right.
In some cases, you look at the translations of this information and these people are referred to as psychics. In other cases, they're referred to as remote viewers, which I know for some reason, the term remote viewer triggers a bunch of our audience.
Oh, it certainly does. But also, I read the term dowser, which, again, it's like there's different levels people are willing to buy. If you hire a dowser here's the thing, it's easier to swallow. It doesn't stick going down when somebody you hire comes out with a water witch and he actually finds a place for you to dig your well and it worked. Well, it's like I always say, it's very hard to argue with success. Hey, well, you didn't know where to look. There's no scientific devices that'll help you out, but this guy did, or whoever is doing the dowsing. In this case, a woman came along on the first trip just to see what was there. So it's like, and I think that is the approach I would say with Eastern Bloc Slavic countries where they're like, hey, this person provided results, success. So
right.
Why get up all in your head? Are they trying to exploit somebody for some gain? We asked them to do this. They did it. Case closed.
And the gentleman involved in this, Sirikov, once he heard the story, he informed the team that he had had a similar dream. I mean, of course, he could just be saying, hey, I had the same dream he had. But he said that he had the same dream with the historical figures coming and saying this information was taking place. Now, it's not clear, again, lost in translation, whether he's saying that he dreamt that happened to Kekemenov or he's saying it happened to him. I think he actually dreamt that it happened to Kekemenov or that he had similar information. So that's the first thing that he says when they had this meeting. Kekemenov even drew a picture of where this was. We'll have that on the episode page for this. Now, General Kanev reported all of this to his chief Ministry of Defense, Colonel Professor Naplatonov, whose daughter, Marina, would later also become a psychic involved in the story. I know there's a lot of psychics. Again, I want to say, I'm not even positive psychic's the word that they want to put on this, but that's what, it's semantics. When you think about the bad words that you can say in Britain that you can't say in the US and the other way around, just think about how the words mean different things in different places. They have different baskets of information associated with them.
You can say intuitive, let's say, or gut feeler. Somebody who's gets hunches and they turn out to be mostly right. And with this story, these are all high-ranking government military officials in the highest echelons of Bulgarian government. And case in point here, you have Colonel Professor Naplatonov, who is, what has he got? He's the Minister of Defense, whose daughter is able to come up with this, let's just say psychic. Let's just go with this for right now.
Let's just go. We'll go with psychic. Okay. Also, by the way, we know that we're going to be saying all these names 3 different ways or 4 each by the end of the show. We already know that, so no one needs to tell us.
No, please just roll with that.
After this meeting, a team of 6 people decides they're going to go up there and check this out. This includes Kanev. They packed up and headed for Sarichina. None of them had ever heard of it, according to Kanev. So they tried to plan out a route. They had maps. This is before everyone had GPSs and iPhones. So they got their maps out and figured out where they're going. They got close. They weren't really sure how to get to the last part of the route. Marina Naplatonova, the daughter of the Minister of Defense that we were just talking about, and herself a psychic, actually told them when and where to turn as they drove further into the countryside. There was a long series of different forked dirt roads with no signage. And she was telling them which fork to take every time they went somewhere. At one point, even saying, no, wait, back up, go back there and turn.
And, well, first of all, they thought they're going to take a helicopter there. And
that's right. The pilots refused to go up.
So the weather turned really bad. Think about this. This is December
1990.
1990. And they got some bad weather reports. They didn't want to fly, and they realized, like, well, look, these are military men. They just said, like, yeah, you're right. Well, let's take a microbus there. And so what they did is they just took a microbus. They all piled in, and as it was described, spirits were high, going there and back. There was singing and joking, and they all felt really good about it, but they relied on her. Well, they had a map printout, but they didn't rely on her. They said, yeah, there's no signs here. So we know that the road's underneath the snow, which way to go? And she would tell them, take this turn. There's a lot of forks in the road. I'm not getting ahead of myself here, but I think it was also a bit of a test for this team. I got that sense too of like whatever, let's say, force is leading these people there. And you and I are going to talk about competing forces, perhaps. Whatever's leading this team here for the initial discovery, I think is leading them, but it's also a test to see, is their mettle up to it? Can they find this place? What will they do? Can they handle this? Will they do the right thing by the spirits of Bulgaria?
I like that. I like that. It's very romantic.
Well, there is a lot of national romance and legend and lore about all this, including real history. This is not just, this is not Baba Yaga. No, that's more folklore. These are real people, historical people. And he has the dream like the Star Trek, right? It's like, choose your mentors. And it's like, now Abe Lincoln's showing up.
Right.
I will help you as much as I can, Captain Kirk, but you're doing all the fighting and the double fist, knocking of people down. In all seriousness, this is something that is rooted in Bulgarian pride and national history, as we've just said. So there's a weird part of this that to me, gives it a little more authenticity.
And here's another thing that's interesting in referring to the missing signs. When we were talking about Dimitar Kekemenov, the journalist who kind of broke the story initially, he thought that a bunch of the signs had been taken down by the military after the operation started. But when you read General Kanev's account of it, he was saying there were no signs to start with. The closest one to the village was 3.5 kilometers, I guess, which Kekemenov did photograph. He has a picture of that sign. But getting closer and closer, you need to know where you're going, or you're not going to, and or be a psychic to find it. Once they found the village, they reported all this back to the commander of the Bulgarian ground forces at the time, General Radu Minchev. Now, keep in mind, the Berlin Wall had fallen less than a year before this, and Minchev was a communist general trying to find his place in a new world order. That phrase, by the way, was popularized by President George H.W. Bush at the end of the Cold War, contemporaneously with these events, actually just a little bit later in March of 1991, right in the middle of all this. The point is, all that's happening at the same time, the fall of communism. General Minchev wanted to dig. That was his decision. So on the morning of December 6th, 1990, equipment was moved into place, including a radio relay area. And if we're not mistaken here at Astonishing Legends, you can still see the remains of a radio tower at the site today. I saw it. I've seen pictures of it on Google Maps and Google Earth.
Probably running a number station.
Well, when I saw it, I didn't know I was like, well, that looks like a radio tower. It's clearly abandoned, but I didn't put two and two together until I realized where the hole was, which we figured out. And it was right next to it. And it's like, why else would that be up there in the middle of this village? Like you said, a number station. But it's a tiny little tower. It's not very tall, but their elevation's good, so you wouldn't need a huge tower. So,
well, as you said, it's a relay station to headquarters. So they just have to bounce the signal to another repeater to get it to the HQ.
There were rumors that maintained in the area, in addition to the treasure, there was a map buried with it with locations of other treasures of similar value all over Bulgaria.
Another big selling point, it wasn't just one thing.
They seem to be thinking, is this a treasure? There's mention of it being a golden treasure, but there's the other idea of it's kind of like the Holy Grail being a little wooden cup. It's like, it might not be that kind of treasure. It might be a different kind of treasure. And that's the thing to remember with these things, whether you're looking at Oak Island or the search for the Holy Grail or whatever else, it's not always the bright, shiny thing that you think you want to have. Sometimes it's something that might be a key to the history of humanity itself.
Well, two things quickly that come to my mind. Yes, you're right. It could be like Oak Island. It's not a big treasure chest full of gold doubloons. Well, certainly that figures into the story where maybe somebody did find some Spanish gold coinage. Remember the gentleman who suddenly had money and then suddenly took off with his family? It's like, see ya. That could be part of it. But the other theory is that this could be, one theory is Shakespeare's works, the first folios, perhaps.
There was one rumor it was the secret of the Mona Lisa. Who was she?
It could be that, but it's something of cultural and, as it was told them by spiritual messaging, that it would affect humanity globally. So it's something important to the whole earth about what are...
It's probably not the Mona Lisa, secret of the Mona Lisa. I mean,
listen.
I mean, people want to know, but I don't know if it ranks with global humanity.
Hey, listen, if you're Dan Brown, then the Last Supper...
That's more like a bunch of people going, that's interesting. Anyway.
Well, as it's leading to, it leads to one of the biggest questions we have out there. Who are we and where did we come from?
Yeah.
Now put that on the back burner. For right now, the other thing I was going to say is we talk about the other appeal of this. It's not just one cache that they might have found, is that they were getting the impression that there could be a network of treasures. And what does that remind you of, Scott? Knights of the Golden Circle. A network of caches spread throughout the country, done in the 10th century by Samuel and perhaps his predecessors, but also it needs to be found. It's time. That's why you can't keep a good treasure down. It's gonna, like a sliver, it's gonna work its way out.
Did you mean splinter just then?
Yeah.
You said sliver. Yeah.
That's what we called it, sliver.
Are you serious?
Yeah, sliver.
In the Pacific Northwest?
Well, you could have a splinter
when
or a sliver.
When a piece of wood is stuck in your finger, you call it a sliver?
Yeah.
No way. I've never heard that in my life.
Well, there you go. You could there's your treasure of knowledge.
Yes, I love it. Leave it in. Sliver. I thought it was a splinter. Sliver was a weird movie that came out in the 90s, I think, speaking of the 90s or maybe the early 2000s.
No, but the idea, though, is that I've heard it both ways. And that's why I'm saying, and people getting upset about, no, we say it here, this way. It's like, really? How long have you been living there? 20 years? Well, that's nothing. That's nice. I grew up there.
Got it. A sliver works its way out.
Whatever it is, it pushes its way out. In the case of treasure, we were going to talk about that a little bit more and get back to kind of the ideas of Lafitte, in that there are a lot of ghost stories tied with buried treasure, and the barrier either keeping people away or letting them know about it. The right people have to come and find it. It can't be Allison Duty from Raiders #3. It can't be in the wrong hands, because what will happen is that powerful forces will burn your logo off the side of the crate, or make sure that the right people come and find this. And so that's what they're thinking. I'm not, this is actually not really a tangent. This is part of the story, in that these are the right people that have come along now to find this perhaps treasure. And there are more if they find this one. And as I said, a feeling of passing the test. You find this one, there's more around. It's written on a map, too. You don't have to look that hard. If you find the first one, you'll get a map to the other ones. But what they're seeing here, like I said, with the road map, they don't need the map. They're guided. And here they finally come across a sign saying Sarichina village, a few kilometers away. And that's how they know they're on the right track. All this guessing here and there where they could easily get turned around and lost and stuck in the snow, they made it.
That's right. So initially, the code name for this excavation was called Cable, because they accidentally cut a cable when they first started digging. That was their first code name for it, apparently. I don't know if anyone scooped us on that. I like to find the weird facts. A lot of people have covered this story, so I like to find the weird facts that I wonder if anybody else had that. They probably did. There's some good folks out there now doing the deep dives. But I think it was a telephone cable or something. But by 4 o'clock on the first day, they had created a 50-foot opening about 8 feet deep, and they had found nothing interesting. It was kind of more of a trench. So they stopped. And they went, at this point, to consult the 4 psychics associated with the project, 3 of whom were on site. Again, that's Marina Naplatanova, the colonel's daughter, Dimitar Kekemenov, and Dora Sineva Petrova. One of the psychics, who is one of the key figures in this story, was back at their headquarters, and that was Elisaveta Loganova, or Ellie. She becomes the most prominent psychic associated with the initial team, and she is what I think becomes the primary guide and the primary communicator with something intelligent that seems to be sending messages and telling them what to do. And the psychics told the team, are you ready for this, Forrest? This is where you say your line.
You've made a note for me to jump in here. Okay. Indeed, they're digging in the wrong place.
That's right.
I am the sultan of the sea.
You don't have to
there's
do
going to be
the
no, I know there's going to be hopefully that'll be the last of the Indiana Jones references, but I'm making no promises.
Well, so it turns out the psychic said they needed to move 100 meters or 330 feet to the east. That's strangely almost the exact spot that Dimitar Kekemenov had slipped and fallen in the snow on the first day they surveyed the site, which was the day before, something they had all laughed about. They actually had a moment at that spot, which I thought was interesting. Now the psychics are saying, you know what, this is where you need to go. And it's like, well, wouldn't you know it? This is where he fell down yesterday.
Look, we get this. There's no, it's all speculation and this and that with this, but it's easy to see this being a fool's errand, something of folly, because they're starting to believe their own baloney, their own borscht here, thinking that, well, we're getting these signs. This is happening. Something's leading us to this. And certainly I think that can happen a lot too, is that you read into signs that say, dig here, the X marks the spot, and you find a little something and that keeps you going.
Yeah.
But just hang with us, folks, because it gets bigger and weirder.
Did you see that tweet where people were talking about Squarespace and our offer code?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, someone was saying how a long time ago they used Squarespace for their photography business and really liked it. But now they're wondering how it compares nowadays as they're looking for a new website platform. Well, I can assure you, Squarespace is constantly updating with the latest features, increasing productivity, and improving functionality with the best partnerships. And their award-winning support has always been right there for us. And Squarespace design and templates are some of the sharpest and most artful I've ever seen.
Yep, and it's perfect for anything you got going on and want to have an online presence for. From restaurateurs to Reiki masters, arts and crafters, designers and drafters, bloggers, vloggers, and especially photographers.
Nice. I'll stress this again, too. When you meet someone who's interested in what you do and you want to turn them into a buyer, a client, a customer, a reader, a viewer, or just a follower, you don't want to tell them, yeah, just go to, fill in the name of a social media platform here, and punch in the @ symbol, __, hashtag, $, 3 words all in lowercase that are hard to decipher, a semicolon followed by closed parentheses. Look, they're never going to remember all that, and they ain't going to bother, and you just lost a sale or a viewer. What you should be telling them is, yeah, just go to, insert your name or business, .com or .whatever you like, and done. Everything you want repped is there. And now this person can buy your stuff, schedule an appointment with you, donate to your cause, join your club, read your writing, or just look at your content, you superstar influencer, you.
Hey, look, if you're hesitating, thinking you're going to have to learn web design to get your site going, no, you do not. A lot of web designers specialize in building Squarespace sites. So if you want to hire an expert, just visit the Squarespace Marketplace right on their website.
Yeah, we couldn't be happier. But look, you don't have to take our word for it or spend any money to find out. Just go to squarespace.com/AL for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code AL to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
One more time, because we love to rhyme. Squarespace.com/AL for a free trial. Use offer code AL to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to experience true horror in its most visceral form? We often hear stories about serial killers, kidnappers, and potential predators on the news. We read about the unspeakable crimes they've committed secondhand. But what about the victims? What about those fortunate few that made it out alive to tell their tale? Look no further than Let's Not Meet. It's a true horror anthology podcast narrated by host Andrew Tate that chronicles the first-person encounters of those that survived a brush with the most dangerous monsters of all.
You know, my wife played this show for me a few years ago, and we have both been hooked ever since. It's so great, and it just keeps getting better and better, and it's excellently produced.
Mm-hmm.
We usually listen to it at night when we're going to sleep, which, well, let's just say, if you don't mind being scared to sleep, it's a great way to go. As Forrest said, Let's Not Meet is true horror stories by those that made it out alive. These are first-person accounts.
We love this show so much, we asked Andrew if we could guest read a couple of stories for it, which he lets folks do from time to time, and he said yes! So when you subscribe to it, look for the first show of April 2023, and you'll hear both Scott and me narrating a couple of the stories.
And I got to drop an F-bomb.
Oh my.
We never get to do that over here. I mean, if we do, then Sarah bleeps it the out.
Indeed. Join Andrew every Sunday night to hear listener-submitted stories like The Fingers Under the Door, The Hotel Basement, and The Laughing in the Woods. True tales guaranteed to keep you in suspense. You can catch Let's Not Meet, a true horror podcast, on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts today.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and when I'm not investigating rainbow portals out in Black Forest, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Now let's get back to the show.
So Kanev points out in his book, Colonel Kanev, that the roads where they wind up digging actually form a cross, and they do. Again, visit our webpage for the episode to see the aerial view of the location. Or again, if you're a member of patreon.com/astonishing legends, we're going to go over this live on video on the next Junk Drawer sometime in the next week or two. But when you see it from the air, there's a confluence of roads that do make a kind of cross here where they wind up digging, which of course brought me right back to Oak Island.
Right.
And also to the triangle at Skinwalker Ranch. And there's some parallels between all these stories. And if talk about everything is connected. There's so much that happens in this story that is similar to Skinwalker Ranch, to Oak Island, to the vertical plane, as we're going to find out here in a little bit, and also to Siren Call, the Hungry Ghost.
Right. There are spiritual and supernatural and paranormal leitmotifs going on here. And that, like I said, it's not exactly the same things happening, but they certainly rhyme. It's like the rule of threes, is that there are recognizable patterns, and maybe we as humans just place meaning into this. But what we'll see here is, like all of our legends and lore, is that there are themes that keep getting repeated, and it's no different with this treasure story.
Well, Colonel Kanev points out in his book that something unseen is guiding them. He adds that 2 of the psychics on their team are a form of remote viewers, as I said earlier, who can communicate with intelligent, unseen entities.
Look, those are their words, not ours, folks. So,
yeah, those are their words. And
take a shot of vodka if you like, but don't blame us for it.
So as these folks reported back to General Menchev at the Ministry of Defense on their inauspicious beginning of digging in the wrong place, the guiding psychic, Elisateva, or Eli Loginova, drew a sketch, which you can see in the photo gallery on our webpage for this episode. It's some kind of Pythagorean-looking thing with a jagged king's crown at the bottom of it. It's very interesting. Kanev says they didn't really understand it. On top of that, Loginova wrote the following under the sketch. Now, keep in mind, our translation is not 100% on the mark here, but this was under this drawing, which, again, looks like it's very geometrically shaped. It looks like a series of boxes connected at their corners. And then there's a strange, almost king's crown shape down at the bottom. She wrote, "This is a dangerous game of chess, and the last move is the most important. This is your move. This is the place where you should dig. This will be the salvation of Greater Bulgaria. This will save your country from destruction, from the doom of decay, from its crystal fragility. It will become as strong as steel, as strong and powerful as it was 1,350 years ago." Which I guess historians took issue with that. They were like, we don't know really that. Okay. But that's what she wrote. That's what she wrote there.
You're pulling the thread on the hat in the can scenario from the Larry Sanders show. You're arguing that the brim should come out first out of the foam can for the foam hat. I think part of the fool's errand is trying to really gauge this and nail this down. And I think as one of the themes as well, there are things that are not right. And I don't know why they aren't. If the sources, let's say, the ethereal sources, think they're right, if they're wrong on purpose, or there's a trick being played here, or what the reality is. But yeah, not everything is coming through right. It's kind of like with Philip, the conjured Philip, in that they purposely, and I thought it was a clever idea, they purposely made up a fake history, but with real places, but they could track it. It's like, is Philip coming through responding to knocks about false places? Same thing with Siren Call. Is these places that you mentioned, you're not exactly right for something that's supposed to be all-seeing, omniscient. These things are kind of wrong here. But in this case, that passage reminds me most of Oak Island, and that it's a puzzle. If you go in strong, you're going to ruin it. Right. It's like one of my favorite movies, Heat. De Niro asks, are we going in stealth or are we going in strong? Are you going to try and figure this out and go in sneaky and steal the treasure out from under something by stealth and cunning? Or are you going to go in with guns blasting? And that's initially, sadly, what happened with Oak Island. You start digging down. It's like, this is a puzzle. This is a game of chess. If you goof this up, you flood the whole thing. Now, with Oak Island, though, I think that may have all been a ruse. There are certainly things to, if you believe the stories of the augurs going down, them hitting chests, finding pieces of parchment with India ink on it, pieces of metal that were unknown. But it may not be, in my estimation, the real way to get in. Here, I think it's a little simpler, but this is definitely one entrance. But what she's saying here with this message is, this treasure, whatever's down here, will not be acquired by the unworthy. You have chosen poorly. You're in danger if you don't do this thing right. So that's a huge warning. And you're right. I didn't really think about the geometrical or sacred geometry aspects, perhaps, of the map that she drew and the layout of this thing.
Yeah, and that's a recurring theme with dozens of additional drawings that are published in Colonel Kanev's book. There's a geometric theme to them. They're very elegant in a way. One of them even looks a little bit like the etching that they sent up on Voyager. Of man. And yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, which we will, in, again, another overused word, we'll curate the unpacking of that in part 2. This is the part that reminded me of Skinwalker Ranch. On December 7th, the second day of this operation, and we're not going to do this day by day because it was 2 years, but there were some phenomenal events that happened right at the beginning of this. Oh, and by the way, I did want to point this out. This December 7th, 1990, the Shermans purchased Skinwalker Ranch in the late 90s, just a few years after this. And stuff was happening at that ranch before they got to it. So there's a little bit of concurrent activity going on there. They're not in the same neighborhood or anything, but I did think that was interesting. So on December 7th, 1990, day 2 of the work at Sarichina, the brand new state-of-the-art excavator they had brought to dig with ceased to operate. It simply would not function. There were no oil leaks, no sign of damage, and no foreseeable reasons why it wouldn't work. It had been fine the day before.
Yeah, that's a lot like the series now. That's out now. I think a new season's coming up. It's just like, you go there and then the rocket blows up, and you go there and now the excavator doesn't work, and you go there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the Skinwalker Ranch series. And by the way, I did want to say for folks who hear Forrest mentioning Lafitte, that's a series we did on the pirate Lafitte, a lost treasure in the New Orleans area. If you look up our back catalog, LAFFITTE, you will find that series. It's an interesting series about a search for his lost treasure. He was such a successful pirate, he almost controlled the entire Southeast, and the word to fence something was based on goods that he stole being passed through a fence for money.
Passed through a fence. You stick your hand in the hole, and that's where that originated. But and again, when you have control of the trade through an area, you have the ability to amass a lot of wealth. Same thing with Sheriff Plummer in another mentioned series, in that he was the sheriff and possibly, more than likely, the highwayman in charge of a lot of gold coming through the area, because he knew what travelers were coming from the east to the west, passing through there. But here's the other thing I was going to say about when you have that kind of control. Supposedly millions were stolen at that time in today's money, in gold and payroll. That was the other thing coming out west. And sadly, people would come out with their life savings to buy the supplies for their farming operations. And, they would steal that. Well, they never found any of that money. It must have went somewhere, but it was never found. Well, the only lead you can get is possibly from somebody who can take a shortcut, and that would be a psychic. So the psychics are saying, like, look, those on top are blocking the work to prevent damage to what is uncovered.
So what they're thinking, or what they're saying, is the reason the excavator's not working is this work is too important. There is too much risk of damage, archaeological and construction-oriented damage, to the work that you need to do. You need to proceed from here by hand.
Well, in another case of everything is possibly connected, who's one of your favorite guys at Oak Island who is fond of using dynamite for his excavation?
Yeah, Dunfield. Dunfield the Destroyer, I called him, I think, at Oak Island. He just turned the whole island into Swiss cheese. It almost didn't matter who came along later to do what, because he did so much damage to the surface, all the top layers of...
Yeah, you're bringing heavy machinery, and you're just clearing... it's a little bit of the Gordian knot. Like, let's not waste time trying to unravel this and decide who's king. I'm just going to take out my sword, cut it in half, done. And in this case, that makes sense, because this is a lot of this, they will get to hard rock, but it's not easy digging. Plus, as I said, this is in the wintertime. Ground is hard and frozen. So it's a monumental task. And in this case of Oak Island, though, it's just like, look, let's not pussyfoot around. Let's just get excavators here and mow the whole thing down. But what I like about this and Oak Island is that ain't going to work. This is a clever puzzle. You can't just tip the chessboard over and win.
As you just said a few minutes ago, this gear, every time they go to dig with heavy equipment at Skinwalker Ranch, the gear breaks down.
Right.
New, whatever. Brought in by third parties, rented, whatever, it stops working. This exact same kind of thing happens. It seems a little strange to be a coincidence to me. So, and especially considering this happened back in 1990, those guys are having those problems in the past 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So the team is forced to start digging by hand. They go back, they meet with General Minchev again. At this point in Colonel Kanev's descriptions in his book on the Tsarichina Phenomenon, it becomes clear that for the folks involved in this project, that the presence of ethereal, telepathically communicating higher beings are just a part of the process. And this is something that Forrest said earlier. As ordinary to them as the people they are digging in the tunnels with. Now, and this says something. It's interesting to see that incorporated into a mystery that we cover. Just the complete, at least from one particular point of view, the complete removal of stigma associated with that. It makes for a very interesting retelling of what happened. Now, conversely, culturally, if you refuse to believe in that sort of thing, do you now throw the baby out with the bathwater and disregard the entire story? Now, undoubtedly, some people will, but we think that's a disservice too. There are boundaries to everything, including information, borders. But borders are just that. So if you think some of the information is bad, does that automatically mean all adjacent information is bad too? Perhaps. In some scenarios, it probably is. It's just food for thought. You're going to see why I'm setting this up.
Well, yeah, look, none of us are using this information here to actually go find anything. This is entertainment, folks. And we were entertained by it. We hope you are too, in the telling of this story, because what does everyone look for at the beginning of the movie? Based on a true story. And here it kind of is, whether you believe some of the details or not. So it starts off, okay, treasure is a very real thing, especially if you have the means to go dig it up like the military. And you have a lot of control within the military and military means, much like Mel's Hole, you start bringing in the yellow equipment, right, as they said.
Yeah.
And you close it off and you have that ability
yellow
to put
gear.
Yellow gear, and you start closing it off and you have the ability to keep people out so they're not prying, and you pretty much have everything at your disposal, including at the beginning enough money to budget for this. And so it starts off like that, but then, well, here's where I'll make a distinction, because if you believe in some of these other places that purportedly our U.S. military have closed off and know about, and certainly this is no secret, but there are DUMBs, deep underground military bases, where it's all very secret, and you don't know about them. You're not supposed to, and we do know about some of the bigger ones, Cheyenne Mountain and this and that, but there's a lot more that you don't know about, and who knows what's going on there, or even Area 51. We know it exists. You don't really know what's going on there. When word comes out, you don't want to believe that either, because it's too outrageous. So they have access to the site and they can control what's going on, but it starts to become overwhelming, I think, even for the searchers. So if you're entertained like us, just go with it for the moment and realize that they're getting messages, or they're starting to decipher what's going on as a message to them. And it's something they need to deal with, because they're not going to make any progress if they keep ignoring it. You can't, again, you just can't bull in a china shop your way into this. And they start getting messages through their psychic friends, their contacts here, that is steering them in the right or wrong way. But I will admit, some of the names associated with the psychic contacts, they made me smile.
Yeah, I can't figure out what's happening here. And again, due to translation errors, this is a little tricky to decipher, but they go back after the excavator dies to meet with General Minchev again and fill him in. And the long and short of this next meeting is that Eli Laganova was communicating with a couple of beings who referred to themselves, again, translated, I guess they were calling themselves Kiki and Roro. I'm not sure why their names are so cute. It could be bad translation, but I guess initially these two things were working in concert together to guide them. They were collaborating, these two beings.
Did you feel any connection to the other surname, Kekemenov? Kiki and Kekemenov?
No, but I mean, now that you mention that,
I don't know. It's just odd. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why I smiled, is that the
Kekemenov.
Yeah, there are funny things about this, of course, and you can chuckle. And if it wasn't recorded, this would be too impossible to believe. But keep going, sir. Yes.
Well, so apparently, for whatever reason, these two beings were now at odds with one another. These two beings that no one has seen, they're just sending messages through the psychic. So they're against each other, and this divides the team up in terms of who they want to decide with. So now, ostensibly, there's the great possibility that this entire operation is tearing itself apart from the inside by arguing about which imaginary being a psychic is talking to that they should be following instructions from.
All right. Another reference. And again, don't look at these as, I know, it may seem like we're not getting to the narrative, but this is all tied in. This is part of it, but it's also references to, like I said, when you have kind of limited source material with this, except for a few reports, and the reporters of the story are credible to us in the West. You talk, well, depending on your viewpoint, of course, journalists and high-ranking military people. But in this case, is that you don't have a whole lot of source material, so you're going with it. So there's not a ton of really established reports. And what Scott and I do, and hopefully it's worthwhile, is that you start making connections and parallels to other stories we've covered and know about. And maybe there are patterns here to help us understand what's going on. And what else does it remind you of, Scott?
Well, where these two beings, if they are communicating and there's a real paranormal happening here, and now they're causing strife among the group and tearing them apart. This is something that we have seen before with the Siren Call of the Hungry Ghost and the vertical plane. More Siren Call in this case, I think. Well, yeah. I guess both of those stories have that, and that comes around to the trickster idea and the whole thing about unraveling the humanity that's caught up in the interactions.
Well, the consciousnesses of it, I guess. In that, remember in vertical plane, you had 2109.
That's right.
I am the puppet master. I'm playing with you. Can you figure out the riddle? And then you have somebody else who like, hey, you stop that. Stop giving them these humans clues. And you had 2109 fighting with another entity who's trying to subvert him, and they're arguing amongst themselves.
That's right.
It's paranormal comedy. It's hijinks.
And that's the same thing that's happening here, apparently.
Right. A little bit, yeah. Like I said, you don't trust it, and you can't because it's all invisible to us. You're only getting messages, and again, in the case of vertical plane, through an old PC, and here you're getting it through people who may be mistaken. As we said, the best psychics, Baba Vanga, 80%, maybe this is the 20% that is wrong.
Yeah.
And you're off in the wrong direction, and that makes a difference. Here, though, like I said, there's something going on here, which is, again, it's paranormal Keystone Cops.
I guess because the other possibility, of course, is that the psychics are all pulling everybody's legs. It's a hoax, and they're manipulating everyone.
That could very well be the case, and it could be something to do with government funds, perhaps.
Right, and that'll certainly come up in our theories when we get to those in part 2. But for now, let's say, no, this is a paranormal happening, but it's also a loggerhead situation where there's some kind of fight happening in the other dimension that's bleeding over into this one. Let's just pretend. Little suspension of disbelief. Why would that be happening? Because it can. Whatever the case, Spirit Mommy and Daddy are fighting, and the kids don't know who to stay with in the divorce. That's what's going down right now. This leads to a schism of belief in the best course of excavation action. And Professor Naplatinov, the Minister of Defense at the time, who was aligned with his psychic daughter, Marina Naplatinova, are siding with one of these beings, and Eli Laganova is with the other one and has some folks in her camp. It's a little hard to get all the specifics figured out from translation, but that's what it sounds like is happening.
No, but it also sounds like academic competing archaeological teams who believe different things. Yeah.
That's right. There's always people arguing over what theory, what's the best way to proceed here, and now they seem to be doing that from both sides of the veil. So what's this all about? Well, both Kiki and Roro have said that there's a message for humanity that's going to be uncovered in this operation.
Right.
And they each want to be in charge of getting to it, but they won't share the message. Now, Colonel Kanev says in his book that he suggested that they both share their messages, and if they're the same, everyone continues to work together.
Right.
But Professor Colonel Naplatinov refused, and he and his daughter resigned from the project. This shocked Colonel Kanev because it was only day 2. This was day 2.
Yeah, already.
These people came apart. In 1992, sadly, Marina Naplatinova committed suicide, and 4 years later, the colonel, her dad, the two of them that had just quit, was found dead under mysterious circumstances beneath a bridge in the capital city of Sofia. In Bulgaria.
Also, sound familiar? It's a little bit of strife, and the other sad fate of Joe Fisher from Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts.
Yep, who after the book was written, he unfortunately took his own life. There are ongoing parallels here. It's a little strange. Kind of starts taking notes from this point forward, his own notes, which is how he was able to write a book. The operation at this point is named Operation Sunbeam or Sunray. Interestingly, Kanev says that they just worked feverishly without questioning any information that they received from Laganova, but just doing. Remarkably similar aloofness required for the Philip experiment to work. They just kind of went. They dug by hand, relentlessly, not really talking, just working, taking turns with the picks, not questioning the messages coming through the psychic, just doing it.
Well, as Colonel Kanev explains, and again, this is a very rough translation, it's like the earth that they were digging through started out very hard, but once they started working it seemed to soften for them, like I said. And keep in mind, you're digging in December, going in, it's going to be like that and cold. I'm not sure when the winter ends, but not soon. They got a few months of this hard digging and in cold weather, but these people are very hardy, okay? And he also said that he saw numerous colors in the sediment when they were digging, and that suggested to him some sort of structure in layers of sediment, right? So either it's fill, or in geological processes, there were an overlay, again, 1,300 years, 1,000 years, something overlaying that soil that was intentional or just geological processes, but they're making progress. That it's a sign that they're getting through the layers. And geologists have told him that what he was observing was just the basic strata from normal tectonic and geologic activity, but he disputed that, and he felt that they were digging into something that had been constructed, that was man-made.
Or I don't know if you should put man in front of made.
Oh, yes. Well, non-human made. Human made or non-human made.
Maybe non-human made.
Is that something is non-organic. There's a fabrication to this, and that's another thing that people will argue at Oak Island, again, not having the evidence to see the layers and what they've discovered going down deeper into the layers, but it's been argued, like, what's just a sinkhole? And as it pulled in stuff and debris over the years, that's what people are finding. But when you start to find it at measured intervals of 10 feet as a platform of logs, and on the one platform you find something there, and at 90 feet you find that, again, a rectangular stone with words on it, you got to wonder, this seems very unlikely that this is natural erosion into a giant sinkhole. But some people are going to believe that. And I don't fault them because we don't know. But what he believes, Kanev, is that there's some order to this. This is not just natural, but the layers that they're finding and getting through and the different colored striations reveal to him that they're on the right path.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Shri Cardoza. Now back to the show.
All right, so here we are. We're still kind of in the early phases of things. The weather is getting bad. Like Forrest said, it's wintertime, and they realized all this precipitation is coming down into the hole, so they put a tent up over it, there's a somewhat famous picture of that. That's one of the ones that's really out there, where you can see this tent over the hole from the fence and everything. It's just so mysterious looking. It's iconic. It's an iconic representation of, like, whatever mysterious thing is happening is like this bad photo of a tent over a muddy hill or whatever. So, well,
it's like E.T. You have that pop-up inflatable tent with guys in scary biohazmat suits
running through giant gerbil trails.
Right, but do we? We're asking for permission to post some of those photos, right?
I'm trying to get in touch with the journalist. I'm having a hard time, though. The only contact point I can find for him is on Facebook.
Yeah,
and we're not friends on there, so I don't know if he'll even respond. I sent him a message. And then I also Google translated it to Bulgarian and sent it again. But for all I know, I said
which
something
turned
bad
into
about
an
his
insult.
Mother. Yeah, exactly.
Like, how dare you? Well, I'm not going to give you anything. What I love about this is that so far it's shaping up. I mean, this is all very... Hey, talk about movie idea. Very cinematic.
No, it is. And someone else somewhere said this should be a movie. Right. I agree. This has all the trappings of a really great movie right here.
And what I like about this is, unlike most of our American fare over here and Stranger Things, which I'm still trying to get through that the season before last, all the Eastern Europeans aren't scary ruffians.
Yes.
Here, they're the heroes. They're trying to get to the truth.
That's right.
But they're employing some out-of-the-box thinking here. And what I loved about this is that, as it was described by the colonel, is that the snow is very wet and heavy and was hard to just drive there alone and walk through.
Yeah.
But they're trying to work here as well. So they're dealing with these, as you said, rough conditions. And then here's the other thing I love is Colonel Kanev says they thought this work would maybe take about 3 days.
Yeah, we'll have this wrapped up. We'll be in and out quick.
It reminds me of a quote from Bill Gates. He said, people generally overestimate what they can get done in 3 days, but you're surprised what you can get done in 3 months.
Yeah.
So he says, scope out your expectations, but people, they always think, wow, this will just take a few days. And then you realize, like, no, this is a lot more than we dealt with. And to their credit, though, or to their defense, they didn't know how far down this thing would be.
No, and how complicated it got, and that's what's interesting about it. And by the way, to this day, I still consistently underestimate how much time it will take to do tasks associated with the production of our show.
Absolutely.
8 years, still doing that.
I know. It's wishful thinking, but I wanted to also remind folks how the tunnel digging is going is that it's kind of going down into a spiral. And once again, there is a connection to Oak Island.
Yes.
In that there was, it wasn't Blankenship, but one of the guys who kept notebooks, it was one of the most interesting things that I saw. He passed away. His widow gives the Laginas her husband's notebooks, and they scour through them, and they're all just spiral old notebooks that he wrote down his findings. And there's one where he describes, and I think it's at the bottom of the swamp, a spiral winding down passageway that he believed was a door to possibly the treasure. And sad to say, I just haven't had time to keep up with the show. I don't know whatever happened with that. But generally, when you watch something like that, it's like they never get back to it. And what you're realizing with production is that they maybe tried or something happened and they couldn't, and so they just dropped it.
There's a lot of that with those kinds of shows.
Yeah. You realize like they didn't announce it, they don't have to, but something came up and it wasn't feasible. In this case, though, is that the spiral tunnel goes down to some kind of platform door or trap door somehow, which leads to something else. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. This thing has led them into a spiraling down type of tunneling, which then leads to the stone. Not the 90-foot stone, but yes, a stone.
Yeah, and one of the things that's confusing about this story is how much of that was work that they were doing and how much of that was them discovering something that was already there. And there's a little bit of obfuscation about that related to the way the story is told. And the other thing that's happening, and it was too much to be able to convey in an episode of the show, is that they're getting really, really complex instructions here. And this goes back to the Vertical Plane series that we did about how you need to proceed to do certain things. There's the instructions that are coming down through the psychics are like, okay, you need to build a shaft that's exactly 1 meter wide, 1.5 meters tall, dig it in this particular fashion. And it's like, if you don't follow these instructions exactly, this isn't going to work. So they're continuously going in there and just doing this work that's been prescribed in a very strange and precise way by these otherworldly voices coming down through to the psychics, because this is delicate work. You are approaching a secret that is going to change all of mankind. It's a message for humanity. It's critical that it is approached in exactly the right way. And it's not clear if this is for scientific reasons or reasons of reverence. There's an idea that maybe they're going to be opening some sort of portal that's a connection to other, get ready for this, this is a connection to other worlds in the galaxy. And that these portals exist on planets all over the galaxy and possibly the universe. And they're all kind of the same. And if you don't go and try to open this door the right way, you're going to screw it up. It's either not going to work, you're going to die, you're going to get sucked into the fifth dimension and turned into a piece of paper. I don't know. It's bad if you don't do it right. So they're taking it very seriously. They're taking the approach and they're taking the instructions very seriously. They're not doing that thing where they just leave the instructions on the ground and go willy-nilly with the shovels.
Right. And it's a little reminiscent in the way you described that of the series I really enjoyed. I was trying to get you to watch it, called Night Sky. Came out last year or the year before, starring Sissy Spacek and J.K. Simmons, terrific actors. Really interesting, but the idea was that there are around the Earth these portals that kind of zip you from one place to another, and even off-world. And unfortunately, like a lot of series, I started to enjoy it, and then it gets canceled.
Ugh, I hate it when they do that. Outer Range has a little bit of that. We brought this up with Mel's whole Outer Range. I'm waiting for the second season on that. I'm pretty sure that's happening. Dark, which I think is a German production. Another similar idea there. Speaking of J.K. Simmons, he had a show called Counterpart. We're getting into a whole Hollywood thing, which I enjoyed, but also they canceled.
Yes.
What's interesting to me, and I always think about this when I think about Hollywood and also the stories that we cover and the chicken and the egg, it's like, which thing is inspiring what?
Right.
But sometimes you do wonder if they're talking about things that exist because they exist in our minds psychically already, if you believe any of this at all. But like these ideas that are out there that like, this is how a portal works. I mean, we don't have mathematical or hard evidence of portals anywhere, really. I mean, there's some, but yet huge slices of humanity routinely go to Sedona to get caught up in vortexes or portals of some kind there. So it's like, why do we believe this stuff? Where did it come from? Where did it start? And how does it connect to stories like this one?
Well, this is where this story is heading, down this spiral tunnel. Why is this such a predominant archetype, I think, in our human psyche, our subconscious about, I mean, we talked about this since the beginning when we started Oak Island. things buried in the ground are mysterious. Where else are you going to hide it? And it goes to folklore, even about talking about Skinwalker Ranch again, and native folklore is that the beings that were here before, not human, got fed up with us or what we were doing to the earth, and they went into the mountain. And they come out again here and there, but they really don't care for our shenanigans, our monkey shines, monkey being the operative word here. It's like they come out and see like, okay, we're going to mess with you or we're going to do this or that, but we're going back in because we don't like it here anymore. You ruined all this. It rings of an interdimensional thing. And I always thought Hollow Earth sounded pretty silly, that concept. But then you're thinking about it the wrong way, perhaps. It's not a big cavern, but maybe an interdimensional state or being that is just below deck, shall we say. So what we have here is that what you're talking about is like, why is this idea so prevalent throughout our movies and stories and folklore? Is it something that is prototypical in the DNA memory of all humans before we even knew what was going on, and we're just kind of we're running around half naked? And what you're saying here, and I maybe tend to believe it, is that it could be something that is from the earliest forms of what it is to be human, and that's where this story is going.
Yeah.
To that point of origin.
So they're doing a lot of work here. They're working so hard, the hand tools are getting broken. Some folks are describing the earth or whatever they're encountering as they're excavating as being as hard as concrete initially. But then once they start working with it, it softens. And I feel like Kanev was saying it almost transforms once you interact with it in a way.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, is that alien? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it sounds like what was found in the second hole in northern Nevada.
Oh yeah.
On the Basque Range is that mysterious substance that they brought out, which got so heavy, I think it broke the chains.
Yeah.
And it transformed when you were working with it. A concept, getting back to narratives and fiction and movies and novels, written about by Kurt Vonnegut in that book. What was that, Scott?
Cat's Cradle.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what was the substance?
Ice 9.
Very cool. Which is either a hard seltzer title or a deodorant, or in this case, a substance that was so heavy when they brought it out of the hole, it started to sink, I think, into the earth.
It's like the China syndrome, like a meltdown situation where it's like going down and they can't stop it from going. And that's what the guy took a little bit of it back to the cabin, and it like wound up destroying his cabin.
It went right into the ground, and I think he thought he was going to repurpose it for something in his cabin, or just thought it was cool. And look, I would also go with the idea that perhaps this is just something fanciful, but as I always say, pretty good sci-fi if it is.
Yeah, very good sci-fi. Somebody's on their toes. So after they keep working, they're down at about 18 feet now, or 5.5 meters. And keep in mind, they are digging themselves in a spiral formation, we think. They come across a strange rectangular stone. So the lead psychic on the project, Ellie Laginova, reported that it was covered with a bacteria. She's, I think, getting this information from her guides or whoever's communicating with. She said it had a bacteria on it that would be dangerous to humans.
Right, which, Scott, you remember where else you've heard that, or at least I have, which is claimed that that's what caused the deaths associated with the curse, was that there was some kind of smeared bacteria that survived. And I do remember on a terrific TV special, Zahi Hawass saying, no, he does not shave the day of an excavation or going into there, because you don't want any nicks or cuts, as we mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah.
They can turn infected, because you don't know what's floating around down there either, which is also kind of a scary proposition, and also very much a sci-fi horror kind of a proposition here.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a petri dish situation. And this is also happening with all the melting that's happening around the world right now. They're discovering viruses and bacteria that was been frozen for 10,000 years. I'm like, hey, let's thaw this out and take it to the lab. You know what? Let's not. Let's not.
Which is the premise of The Thing.
Yeah,
that was a story a couple of years ago. Remember that I think Russia had drilled down through a glacier to the deepest, oldest embodiment of trapped water.
Yes. Yeah. I remember
and they brought some water up, and there's a vial of it sitting on Putin's desk, and people were like, hey, you want to try drinking that?
Yeah, I think they also discovered life forms that were new, that didn't exist anywhere else on the planet, like microscopic life. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So now, they've gotten down to this thing, and what's happening is, again, the messages are coming through the psychics that this is a door. This is a door that they found, And they're going to need to wear protective clothing, gas masks, and gloves before they deal with this. So at that point, they all undertook a serious hazmat decontamination training and protocol, which they developed to try to figure out how are we going to deal with this. We got this hole in the ground. It's hard to get in and out of here. You can't even walk through the tunnels they're digging. We're down at this point. If something goes sideways, how do we deal with the catastrophe that might unfold without losing any of our personnel or setting something loose into the environment? It's like we were just talking about, that suddenly is spreading all over the earth and killing everybody, because it's like, what is this weird thing happening? So then they came up with this long, complex plan that had all these different steps for decontamination, all the stuff that you would do if you were exposed to radiation at a nuclear power plant or something. It's that sort of thing. And this is all spelled out in Kanev's book. This whole thing, this kind of stops them down for a bit. They're like, we got to come up with all this. We got to get this certain equipment in here. And then when you start thinking about the 16 million Levs and where that money went, it's like, well, this is a complex situation. You're going to have to call in hazmat, come up with protocols, train people, teach everyone, okay, what do we do if when we open this, some crazy aerosol comes out and turns us all into mushrooms in front of each other or whatever. It's that they wanted to be prepared for that, so they trained for that before they took the next step.
Interesting you said mushroom. That's another theory that's been kicked around lately, is that there could be a deadly spore or some kind of primordial panspermia spore getting released, which that's a story we got to cover. I've never got a satisfactory answer other than it's just been dismissed, I think, by mainstream science, that it is not what it seems, but there is a microscopic electron microscope shot of a pellet spewing some goo that came from the upper atmosphere. So what's going on there? But yeah, you don't want to, well, it's just good protocol. You don't want to be damaging anything. Also, if there are rare antiquities, they also would be damaged by exposure to air or whatever dust you're doing, whatever you're kicking up. So
and it's the same thing. It's like when you bring an artifact up from the ocean floor, from a sunken ship, you can't just bring it into, you got to be thinking about how the pressure's reduced, it's brought to the surface, and then when you expose it to oxygen, it can instantly crumble or turn it into or start a chemical process that you can't undo. So you have to think about all those kinds of things. So they're considering all this stuff. There's another source, and this is a fascinating one out there. Is a guy named Alex Putney. We downloaded a PDF by him. We'll have a link to that. He focuses on a different arena of these kind of like resonance around the earth. It's it's a whole serious thing to him. But in his writings on this tunnel, he writes at one point, they took out a slab made of an unknown metal, and they were hit at that moment with a powerful beam of light. And then inside of that area, the next area that they went into, they were on a kind of silvery gray floor, and there were smooth walls that had a strange form of writing on them.
Just like Kincaid's Cave.
Just like Kincaid's Cave.
Just like that one description where they're somehow not unnatural, human-made, smooth walls with inscriptions on them. And also, just quickly, that was another thing that I believe that I had read in the notes of Edgar Cayce, again, not him saying that, but his muses, was that there was a Atlantean storehouse of knowledge under one of the paws of the Sphinx. And that's kind of what's reminding me here, what the voices are saying to Dimitar, that if you can find the source of this and find the treasure, this will be revealing knowledge to all mankind and helping everybody, and it's all glorious and wonderful. And I know it was kind of silly, the message he got, it's like the secret to the Mona Lisa. And I was like, okay, that kind of silly. But then you wonder, why has a portrait of a very pleasant looking woman that is that old captured the imagination of so many people? What is it? Is it just the style of painting, the way it was done? Or is there something more about it that is keying into our subconscious? And there's a secret to it that would change the way we think about things. That's what's being promised here.
Or maybe there's something hidden behind the painting itself.
Could be behind the painting. Here, though,
I'm sure it's been x-rayed 1,000 times, but, you know.
Who knows? But it could be the story behind it. Also,
they just found, by the way, using some new technique, they just found some verse of the Bible that had been read in 1,500 years.
I heard that coming in.
No one's saying what it says.
It has something to do with the apostles getting hungry and plucking the heads off of grain and rubbing it in their hands and eating it, I think, on their journey. That's how the chapter starts off. And as we were talking about so many times before, actually, we just did when it came to NASA and our also Russian-themed cosmonaut.
Oh, yes. Junk drawer episode. We talked about a bunch of cosmonauts saw angels outside the Soyuz 7. So if you want to hear that, you got to get over to our Patreon and check out the last junk drawer. But
right, it's a classic move, it seems, by authorities. In this case, ascribed to, because it's on vellum, basically dried animal skins. That it was hard to come by, so he just scraped that part off to recycle it. So thinking, there's other copies, it'll be fine. In this case, though, you have possibly a mystery, and it makes me also think of Nicolas Poussin in Arcadia Ego, which is also the mystery possibly of Oak Island and the Templars and all this. And so there's a lot of interlocked, huge mysteries that could be part of a network underground for safekeeping in all these locations around the earth. And here could be a few of them. And again, that's what the voices, the muses are saying to the psychics and the dowsers, that you're on the right track, but you must follow the instructions precisely, or doom will ensnare you.
Yes. These instructions that keep coming, it's like, okay, now do this, now do that.
Right.
Now it's getting more and more complex. And Colonel Kanev also said that there was an area here where there was a force field that the men couldn't get past. This is an invisible, like straight out of Star Trek force field. And when they tried to, they would be violently thrown backward. So much so that one guy, I think I read one account that said he was thrown back through the air 4 or 5 feet, hitting his head so bad on the back of the tunnel or the tunnel wall that he was injured and collapsed.
They had to extract him, immediately.
What is that? What is this thing that they can't get past? Which is part of why I think Colonel Kanev is such a believer. He's talking about some really serious stuff here that people on the surface, and that's another thing I want to convey, and I don't think I conveyed that. Most of the people on the surface had no idea what was going on. Right. Even the personnel, the military personnel who were there to guard it, they had no idea what was going on in the hole. And only a very small number of people were going down there. And so those are the folks that saw it and experienced what was happening, where the people on the top, they just see dirt coming out and folks going in, although there were rumors of hearing exchanges of gunfire and that sort of thing. And that's another part of this, and this part may be creepypasta, we don't know, but some witnesses insist there was actually a subterranean firefight of some kind, where the 2 men at the rear guard fired bullets that stopped in the air and dropped to the ground, Matrix style. And so we're not so sure about that, but there's a lot of legends that abound about this one. But there's also a lot of this story that's verifiably true, much of it through the pioneering work of the aforementioned journalist Dimitar Kekemenov when he wrote for the paper Nightwork.
Yes. Also, it reminds me a little bit about the purported firefight between military personnel, U.S., and aliens inside Dulce Base.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And some were injured, and they came stumbling out, and
That one's straight out of Stranger Things, that whole story. Or Stranger Things probably took it from that story.
They probably did, yes. They have people scouring that kind of stuff for material, like the CIA does in the plot of 3 Days of the Condor. They do read these things. They have people going through, and probably it's AI now, to find various plots, ideas, things that get leaked. Had they been doing that with a Discord gamer channel, perhaps they would have found some leaked military secrets 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Yeah, I know. I am hearing, of course, it's probably just a cover up, but they're just like, we can't just willy-nilly pop into private servers and monitor what people are saying inside America.
Yeah,
that's where they're I bet they're going to start now, but yeah.
If they haven't been. Right. But getting back to Eli Loginova and her writings, where again did she get them? I want you to tell us all.
Where she got them supposedly from these beings that were guiding her. There was Kiki and Roro, but then after the falling out between Kiki and Roro, one of them went away, and honestly, I can't remember which one did now.
I know. I can't keep it.
I think it was Kiki, and was replaced by another being named Sorel, Sorel, which sounds like something out of the Superman universe.
If there's a dash, if there's a hyphen. Otherwise,
there was no hyphen.
It's a name of a boot or a sausage.
We didn't want to go too far down that route with all these different personalities and all that. You can find this stuff online, but again, it's hard when it's being translated. But there was a new character involved, and they have different personalities. It perfectly mirrors a lot of this stuff from the vertical plane. It really does. Yeah. It's just a different set of characters, but it's the same play. You would almost think they were based on each other in terms of the nature of the interaction, which I personally find very intriguing, because if both of these parties are making all this up, they've made up two stories that are remarkably similar. Similar. Like, there is a lot of common ground.
Well, simultaneous invention theory.
Or is there something about how these things are working on the other side? It's like, that's how it's presenting itself. And it's not necessarily benevolent. It's not necessarily omniscient, but whatever it is, it has a desire to operate this way when it interacts with us. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, and getting back to Rich's Mothman scenario, perhaps it's just like an interdimensional window washer that has a different perspective than us and can see things that we can't, yet they're not anymore. Well, let's say they are advanced, but they are in different ways. It's not like they're all that terribly wise.
Right.
There's some pettiness going on here, which you think
they have
you'd be beyond that. There's
Exactly.
There's
That's
personalities.
the strange thing about it, which that might say, hey, does that mean it's us, or it's at least a carbon-based life form? Because we all know it's not just people that have personalities. Our dogs have personalities. Our cats, the fish in our fish tank. You might even be able to say that a plant has a personality. Who knows? If you really studied it, you might be like, well, this one's aggressive. Look at all the volunteers coming out of that one. And the one next to it is lazy. Yeah. There's a lot of unusual observations to be made here. So it's at this point they send Loginova's writings, because she kept all these notebooks. She had 2 or 3 thick notebooks which were disappeared. Some of them were sent to Baba Vanga, the blind seer. And we talked about her earlier. She was the blind Bulgarian seer, known as the Nostradamus of the Balkans. And reportedly, she had an 80% accuracy rate, as we mentioned, with her predictions. She lost her eyesight when a tornado yanked her up off the ground and threw her some distance into a field. It took a while for villagers to find her, and she was scared, and her eyes were covered with sand and debris from the cyclone that had tossed her there. She couldn't open them. Some money was raised for an operation to help her, but it was a poor village. The operation was unsuccessful, and eventually she went completely blind. Purportedly, she predicted 9/11, that the 44th president of the United States would be African-American, and that was Barack Obama. However, she also predicted the 44th president would be the last president of the United States. So there's some things that aren't true, some things that are. We'll talk more about her record and about her in part 2. But for tonight, we'll leave you with what Baba Vanga said when she was presented with Eli Loginova's writings on Zarichina. And it's going to leave you wondering, could the Earth's first proto-human have been buried for the ages in Zarichina? Listen to what Baba Vanga said.
You will find a sealed and pressurized capsule containing a yellow monkey, neither man nor woman. What will you do with that yellow monkey? If you open the capsule, the air will revive it. I ask, what will you do when it wakes up and speaks?
That's going to wrap up part 1 of Entombed in Zarichina. We'll be back with part 2 in 2 weeks. Join our Patreon to hear us on the much more candid Astonishing Junk Drawer, which most of the time we do live on video for our patrons at patreon.com/astonishinglegends. The next one is actually planned to be a visual exploration of Google Earth at the site of tonight's story.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also head of research and the social media manager. Our technical producer is Ed Vicola, or as we call him, the Mechanic. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland.
Hi, I'm Ray.
Hi, I'm Melissa.
Hello, this is Sheree Cardoza from Sulphur Springs, Texas.
Permission to Astonishing Legends to use my voice.
Now.
Galaxy-wide
compensation.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Carestia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design, and our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Every episode going back to September of 2020 has a transcription available on its corresponding webpage at our website. Earlier transcriptions can be made available upon request to astonishingcontact@gmail.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Facebook, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content, including the Patreon exclusive show, Astonishing Junk Drawer, which is available every week. The main show is not. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.